Monday afternoon, which means we're steps away from the Era Parsegian Gate, and it means Notre Dame is in its drive for 5 to keep a return trip to the college football playoff hopes alive. Tim Priester to my right, Tim O'Malley to my left. I'm John Brice. This is the Irish Illustrated Instant Analysis brought to you by the RV Manufactured Housing Hall of Fame in Northern Indiana Events Center in Elkhart, Indiana. The news of the day, Ashton Craig's injury from Saturday, severe to the point that Ashton Craig's season is over for the second consecutive year. He has to deal with a truncated season and a long rehab process. That means Joe Otting is next man up. Tim Priester, you have watched in depth Joe Otting's plays from Saturday. We've all listened in depth today to Marcus Freeman talk about Joe Otting. Your thoughts?
I thought he struggled. In the snaps that he had. Guys making their first appearance like that, everything just seemed so difficult to do. I thought he looked a little bit stiff. I just didn't think that it was a really great debut opportunity for him in place of Ashton Craig. But it is what it is. Cam Herron, a true freshman, apparently is in the running. I was a little bit surprised that Sullivan Absher, his name wasn't mentioned as a possibility. We'll see if that transpires throughout the week. But a tough situation for Notre Dame, and not the opponent that you wanted to face without Ashton Craig. Marcus Freeman talked about USC is getting a good pass rush with 4 men, and so that makes things a little bit more problematic. But you got to put it together, all hands on deck at the center position, and come up with the best answer.
Yeah, and you've got to get through this week with Otting or some combination thereof, and then you've got a little bit more time to try and sort things out moving forward because you have the bye week the following week after playing 6 consecutive Saturdays. Kind of tying into the center position, Tim O'Malley, our season-long short yardage struggles, regardless of who's been snapping the ball to C.J. Carr and company.
Yes, I asked Marcus Freeman, what's the challenge for a guy like C.J. Carr, he's a shotgun quarterback. All young quarterbacks are shotgun quarterbacks. I mean, Riley Leonard was a shotgun quarterback too. It was just different. But getting him under center, is it a situation where it's just difficult to teach him to get that drive on short yardage situations? And Freeman mentioned if we thought that was what was holding ourselves back, we would be looking into C.J. Carr under center, someone under center. With Joe Otting, he's not as strong as Ashton Craig. Sullivan Absher is. That's why we both thought Absher might be listed. I still think Absher could be one of the answers at that position, of course. But as TJP and I were walking out, I was like, if Joe Otting is really your starter, he has to take 90% of the snaps with the first unit in this practice. If that is definitely your number one option, you can't sit there and say, okay, let's give Cam Herron, Chris Tarrick, Sullivan Absher, all these first-team reps. They have to be snapping the ball. But short yardage with Craig was a problem. Now I really don't think the quarterback under center is which way they're going to go. I'm interested to see what the tweak is going to be. And I know people hate this because it sounds like you're blaming execution, but execution is part of it. Freeman said they had a better play call than we did. They caught us both times. They figured they'd get Malachi Fields open. They covered it. They figured they could roll out and find something in the flat. They covered it. They lost the play call and they lost the execution. Sometimes that is what happens. It doesn't just change because you want it to.
Right, and then you have to, as Marcus Freeman noted, you have to pivot and find a solution to that. And when you talk about the short yardage struggles, again, that is something that has plagued Notre Dame over the course of the year, and that's going to be a key element, as we heard Marcus Freeman say, they're getting that pressure with 4 people. You're going to have a new center, and this is a different time of year for an injury. Let's remember when Charles Jagasaw suffered the ATV accident this summer, that was before camp even started. We're 6 games deep into this season. This is technically week 8 in college football. You don't have the luxury of only having practice and training camp to get extra reps. There's full workloads, school loads for these players as well.
You also, Tim Priester, don't have the luxury of Pat Coogan as the guy you're inserting when they lost Ashton Craig last year.
No doubt. He was so valuable into the equation last year. But, I asked Marcus Freeman about the defensive performance against NC State, and he called it the best defensive performance of the year. I mean, I totally agree with that. I think that Notre Dame did an exceptional job, and I think if you watch, I didn't notice this from the 9th floor of Notre Dame Stadium, the press box, but Notre Dame did an absolutely exceptional job of taking away the cutback run of Hollywood Smothers. They made the quarterback, C.J. Bailey, pretty much one-dimensional throwing the football, and he didn't have a good day doing that either, and so that was a huge part of it. And if you watch the broadcast, as I know most of our listeners here and watchers here did, you heard the broadcast team talk about Tackling Tuesday, which is something that Chris Ash really emphasized, and I made sure that Marcus Freeman understood I wasn't saying, was that the reason everything's been turned around? Because when it's an 11-on-11, it's multiple things, but apparently they've been emphasizing that a little bit more, and I think it was clearly obvious. And I also think that, since the Arkansas game, it's been clearly obvious that the secondary has played more aggressively and attacked the football. So those are all good things. Very important this week against USC, which has a ton of offense to throw at Notre Dame. Jade Mayava is now well settled in to the starting position. I'm not sure he was completely settled in when they played Notre Dame last year, although he played really, really well. But Makai Lemon is just a guy that is so dangerous at receiver. They have a multitude of ways getting the football in his hands. Notre Dame's defense has made great improvement. I wouldn't measure this game based upon trying to hold them to 7 points like Notre Dame's done in recent weeks, because this is a prolific scoring and total offense unit for USC.
Even in USC's one loss, they scored 32 points at Illinois and should have won that game, and their defense betrayed them in the closing minutes. I think that's significant. Another thing to note about Notre Dame's approach here, and your very astute observation in the discipline and the defense and the cutback lanes. Drew Bentock and I noted on Saturday's Overtime Live, North Carolina State didn't have a run from scrimmage that went for more than 10 yards in that game, and they had the one long TD pass for 45 yards where Dallas Golden wasn't in horrible position. You could argue he jumped slightly too soon, or he might have broken up that pass. Then they had one other 26-yard pass, so much better defense that we saw out of Notre Dame on Saturday. And T.O., we have to continue to see that improvement, because it's not just Makai Lemon, as you very well noted right before we flipped the camera on. USC has a real running back right now, and he can be a real problem.
Yeah, it's I want to go back real fast to what Priester said about Mayava not being settled in. He threw 4 touchdown passes. That'll be totally fine if he throws 4 more of this game, as long as he throws 2 interception touchdowns as well. He can settle in, throw his 4, and if 2 come back the other way, Notre Dame's got him again. But when USC comes to Notre Dame, they have had some guys step up running the football. Remember, Marquise Stepp had his best game as a human when he came in with a little anger against Notre Dame. If USC can run the ball, and they were on their way to doing it last year in the near upset, when the injury occurred, not Woody Austin, I keep wanting to say Woody Austin, when injury occurred, that made Mayava that made the offense one-dimensional. The dimension was beautiful. They have great receivers. As Marcus Freeman said, number 6 is a dude, Makai Lemon. They have enough weapons to throw at Notre Dame, where now we are really going to see the defensive turning the corner, because this is by far the best skill position set since Texas A&M came in. And Tim Priest, you said Makai Lemon, he is just so mentally tough and focused. They send those guys to Notre Dame quite often. Robert Woods, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Makai Lemon's the most recent one. And you noted him last year before that game happened. He could give them a problem. And both receivers did.
I put him in a category of
Proctor
one of the 10
too.
most competitive opponents that I've seen play against Notre Dame.
I think Amon-Ra St. Brown and Robert Woods might be 1 and 2. So there you go.
That's heady praise. And another thing to note is that USC coming into this year, and I talked to Connor Morissette, who does a really nice job of covering the Trojans out there for 247. But I talked to some other people in and around that program. They were concerned about their offensive line coming into this season. They expected it to take a step back. And also in preseason camp, Jade Mayava had a tendency to throw too many interceptions, and they thought that this could hold this team back. Now, he had an interception on Saturday against Michigan, but he also is completing his passes at a career best rate. He's making better decisions. And TP, that USC offensive line dominated Michigan on Saturday night in a way that we have rarely seen, whether it's been Harbaugh or the transition to Sharon Moore. Michigan typically, for all its offensive shortcomings, has not seen its defense pushed around. It got pushed around.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And look, when you talk about a ton of offense, when you talk about RPOs, okay, that term's thrown around a lot. There's a difference between RPOs and read option. Notre Dame's a read option team. This is an RPO team that you can run it or you can throw it, and there's more than one throwing option within that RPO. So when I spent Sunday night checking in on to some extent, each one of USC's games, not all of them in their entirety, and the amount of offense that they have. And Mayava, Tim, I know that, like when I say wasn't settled in, he had a big game against Notre Dame. He wasn't where he is now.
Yeah, that interception was a very bad interception against Michigan. It was in the deep red zone. I was shocked. That was his second interception of the season. I was absolutely shocked he threw that. Notre Dame needs something like that again.
The RPO game, I mean, give Lincoln Riley credit. He knows what he's doing offensively, and right now, this Notre Dame defense, again, you can't measure Notre Dame based upon the last 3 games. They're not going to be able to have that kind of success. everything is relative. You got to keep them in check. But Maava and Lemon and King Miller, who's now the third running back, the other two apparently are out.
I think he's the best running back on the
He's outstanding. So great challenge for Chris Ash. And they've had a good build-up to this, as we've said repeatedly. Notre Dame's been facing good offenses, playing very well against those good offenses. This is another level of offense.
Yeah, I think this is clearly USC's most comfort with a quarterback since Caleb Williams. You could argue it's USC's most comfort with a quarterback since Caleb Williams 2022, not necessarily the 2023 version. Before we wrap it up here, T.O., any final thoughts from you before we go do Irish Illustrated Insider Podcast?
Yeah, actually, I don't know why this popped in my head right when Priester was talking about their offense, but this is a game Drake Bowen has to have an outstanding day for Notre Dame, because Kingston Viliamu-Asa is playing his best football. He's Notre Dame's best linebacker. Drake Bowen is an underappreciated player, and he played very well last week. He was I know he covered Hollywood Smothers down the sideline. You don't want to keep seeing that against King Miller, but he was a physical, violent player again. I felt like that was lacking in the first month, maybe the first 3.5 games of the season. He's going to be on the spot in this game because he's on the field for 55 snaps, probably 55 snaps. USC does a lot of damage over the middle, and eyes for a linebacker and RPOs are so much different than anything else. He and Kingston Viliamu-Asa inside those hashes are going to be crucial defending the pass as well.
And with Maava less settled in a year ago, USC still worked Notre Dame over, particularly across the middle and with some crossing stuff. TP, final thoughts?
Final thought for me is Charles Jagas's name came up with regard to Ashton Craig being out, and he did have follow-up surgery. If that hadn't happened, he might have actually been ready to go. Yeah, where he would have been ready to go, but they don't have that luxury. Marcus Freeman said that he would be back at some point this year. I don't know if he meant end of regular season.
He just said at some point.
Or post-regular season, probably more likely post-regular season, but Notre Dame's not going to have that luxury. The centers are going to have to step up this week.
Yeah, we noted a couple of weeks ago on the Irish Illustrated Insider podcast that Jagasad had a significant setback that was going to delay him. If you can win this weekend and you keep alive those playoff hopes, you can hope to get Jagasad back in late November, play a couple of games, then have him for a playoff run, which then would not cost him a year of eligibility. One other quick note on the USC Notre Dame rivalry as we continue to check on that, and it's pressing to a lot of people. It's one of the great rivalries in college football. I'm told by people on both sides of the equation that there's great optimism that this rivalry will be renewed in time to keep it on the 2026 schedule. There's also talk about moving the date on the calendar where you could see it maybe be a September game rather than an October or November game. That's a key point. That's a key point for the folks out west. So we'll continue to monitor that for you. For Tim Priester, for Tim O'Malley, for Drew Mintock on the camera, I'm John Brice. This has been Irish Illustrated Instant Analysis, brought to you by the RV Manufactured Housing Hall of Fame and the Northern Indiana Events Center in Elkhart, Indiana.